So today is 3 of 30 of sharing thoughts while building my AI startup. I very nearly didn't make this one, but there's a topic I wanted to talk about today that has become more popular, isn't it? Something that I've been thinking about a lot since the start of this project. And what people are sort of calling it, or the name that we're converging on, is context engineering. And I think this captures so much more than what people mostly have been calling prompt engineering. So in an AI model, we have a few different things that goes into it. You have your inputs, so that would be sort of text, documents, images, etc. And then you've got your prompt, which also tells the system what to do. And while most people have focused on the prompt itself as the thing that's changing, all of these inputs together are what people are now calling context engineering. And that goes for just the single instance of when you're chatting to ChatGPT or something like that, but also for the entire workflow that you might be passing things through, where you've got some of the multi-step things that we were talking about yesterday. So where you've got some of these different actions and operations that are going through a process, all of this context needs to get managed. And for larger conversations or more complex things, managing that context becomes really important, because it's not always possible to get all of the things that you want into a input from a model. Sometimes you want it to focus on specific parts of what has been provided. And just to get a real specific example, you could be working with a textbook as one of the inputs to your prompt, or part of the context that's being passed on to a model. Now, you might be asking a certain question on one specific chapter that's on thermodynamics, as an example. Now, the context windows, or the amount of stuff that you can chuck at a model, has increased so much that you could probably put the entire book in and you could get a reasonable response. But what might lead to a higher likelihood of a more accurate response, and or a faster response for sure, is if you have just that chapter on thermodynamics handed over to the model prior to it giving you the answer that it wants. So instead of checking the whole book and then having the output generated based on that, one element of context engineering is making sure the model gets the right information that it needs at the time that it needs. And in this example, we might have a way of identifying which chapter is relevant based on the question, and then only serving that chapter to the model for the query. And that's just one example. But you can imagine that this becomes super important when you've got these huge databases and entire corpuses of companies' information being passed to these things, where high accuracy is really important, and also speed may also be important as well. So these are the sort of levers that we can pull to try and make sure that folks, or the agents, get the right context. And I actually really love this idea of shifting from prompt to context. And it's something that we've been working on as well, because there's a bunch of different things that we feed into our models. There's going to be an element of text. There's going to be an element of images. There's going to be multiple different potentially documents. That might be transcripts. There might be recordings, audio, video. And we need to manage all of this context in addition to our prompt, and pass what is relevant onto the model. And this is the process. So the context engineering is a process of making sure that everything that's going in is the right thing. So those are a couple quick thoughts on context engineering. What I'm working on right now is getting the process down so we can better manage the context. So yesterday we talked about workflows. So we're implementing a framework that's going to allow us to do some really funky things like this, and loops and all sorts of stuff. And we've got this down. Some parts of the workflow are going to have prompts. Some parts of the workflow are going to have just normal functions. And now that we've got a repeatable process for the workflow, and we've got a process to test up, now we can start to do some proper context engineering and making sure that we're passing in the right types of information at different parts of the process. Because the problems that we're solving will require different types of information at different points in time. And this is going to set the foundation for us to do that in a scalable way, which will also allow us to test as we go through that as well. So that's it. Really excited for this next sprint. I'm wrapping up some of my other consulting work, so I'm going to be working on this more, and I'm really excited what will come of the additional focus that I can get from this. All right, see you tomorrow.